How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Daf 10 of Masechta Nedarim, friends. Friends, how's Nedarim going? Kind of okay, right? I don't really know what to make of Nedarim. Honestly, Nedarim makes me a little bit nervous because it's been pretty good until now. I've never learned Nedarim before. It's like, I don't know if at some point it's just going to get really hard. But in the meantime, I think it's been pretty smooth. I think we have another pretty short daf today as well. So, also because, unless I'm making a big mistake, which I don't think I am, I think we got up to, basically towards the bottom of Yud Amud Aleph already. So we're really just starting at the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Yud Amud Aleph. And we'll just get to the Mishnah at the bottom of Daf Yud Amud Beis. So, it shouldn't be too much today. We're talking about Kinuyin. When you say, equivalent terms. Friends, we're going to start in Daf Yud Amud Aleph at the Mishnah towards the bottom. Ha'omer konam konach konas hare elu kinuyin lekorban. Okay? So if, of course, a neder is like, this pizza is forbidden to me like a korban. But if instead of saying korban, you say konam, so that's like an equivalent term for korban, as well as konach and konas. Cherek, cherech, cheref hare elu kinuyin lecherim. So those are alternatives for cherem. Naziach, nazik, naziach, paziach, hare'elu kinuyin lenazirus. Okay, so those you could say instead of nazir. Shvusa shkuka no der bemohi, hare'elu kinuyin leshvua. And if you say shvusa shkuka or vowing in Moses, the name of Moses, like Moses did, so then those are kinuyin for shvuas. Says the Gemara, Itmar, we stated Kinuyin, as we've seen earlier in the Masechta, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Lashon Umesein, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, Lashon Shabodu Loim Chacham Lios Noder Bo. So, machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish about what exactly is the nature of these Kinuyim, of these equivalent terms. Rabbi Yochanan says that for example, in Hebrew we say korban is a sacrifice, but in other languages they'll say konam, or konach, or konas. So it's the same thing, but in different languages. So, but really it means korban, and therefore it works because it literally means korban, just in a different language. Whereas Rish Lakish argues and says, no, these equivalent terms are just made up things that the rabbis said that instead of saying korban, you can also say konam, konach, konas. These also work. But they aren't necessarily, how you say korban in some other language. And similarly, it says in the pasuk, "B'chodesh asher bada milibo," in a month that he just kind of made up on his own. Okay, v'taima ma'ita kinu rabbanon kinuyin. So how come, we have how come the rabbis kind of put in place these kinuyim? How come it's okay instead of saying korban to say konam, to lalema korban, because we don't want you to say korban. V'lema korban, say korban. Why not say korban? Dilma amr korban la'Hashem. Well, what if you say korban la'Hashem? Maybe you're going to say this pizza is forbidden to me like a korban la'Hashem. V'lema korban la'Hashem. So what? What's the problem with that? Dilma amr la'Hashem v'lo amr korban. Well, we're concerned that what you might end up saying is just la'Hashem, and you won't mention korban, and you'll just be saying God's name in vain, and we don't want that. So therefore, instead, just avoid the whole korban thing so you don't end up saying La Hashem, essentially. So instead just say konam, and then we'll just leave it there. V'tanya, Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon, V'inayin shel yomar odom, La Hashem ola, La Hashem mincha, La Hashem toda, La Hashem shlomim. Right, it says Reb Shimon, how do we know that you shouldn't say La Hashem ola, you should say ola La Hashem. Right, I know you shouldn't say La Hashem ola, right, God's name first. So, Tamulomar korban La Hashem. So therefore, the pasuk says korban la Hashem. Davka says korban and then la Hashem afterwards. That we don't want you to say la Hashem korban, because what happens if you get interrupted after la Hashem? Then you said God's name in vain. V'kav v'chomer, we make the following kav v'chomer. Umazeh shelo niskaven ela lahazkir shem shemayim ala korban amar Torah korban la Hashem. Well, then certainly in a situation there where you're saying God's name together with a korban, right? You would theoretically be saying La Hashem korban, La Hashem ola, La Hashem mincha. And still we say don't do it, because we're concerned, even though yes, you're doing it in the context of a korban, still just don't go there. Don't say La Hashem korban, because maybe you'll end up saying God's name in vain if you get interrupted. So levatol alachas kama v'chama. So then certainly, it shows you how far we go to avoid saying God's name in vain, that we don't even want you to say La Hashem Ola. Because what happens if you get interrupted between La Hashem and Ola? Certainly it shows you, that how much we do not want you to be saying God's name in vain, right? So certainly, right, levatol alachas kama v'chama, certainly it shows you how much we want you to avoid saying God's name in vain, if we don't even want you to say God's name together with, a korban ola, out of concern that you might get interrupted and end up saying God's name in vain. So it's a sugya that we want to avoid. Leimer kitanoi. So let's say that this machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish about is kinuyim, are they just alternative ways of saying the thing itself, right? So is, konam just an alternative way of saying korban in another language, or is konam something that the rabbis decided would be able to be a substitute for korban, but it doesn't necessarily mean korban in another language. So let's say that this machlokas is like a machlokas tanoi. Kitanoi Beishamai says Beishamai kinuye kinuyin asurin. Beishamai say the equivalent terms of equivalent terms would be asur, and we're gonna see examples later of what that means. What was gzera ligzera? That's what I was trying to think of yesterday. Right. Kinuyin for a kinuyin, and we're saying that nonetheless works. Uvesilal omim kinuye kinuyin mutarin, whereas Basil says that kinuyin, that equivalent terms of equivalent terms are permitted. They don't work. They don't actually make something vowed. My lab. So let's say man de omar kinuyin asurin. So if you say that the equivalent terms of equivalent terms are asurin, kasar kinuyin lashon umesein, we'll be like how Rabbi Yochanan is explaining, which is that there are actual terms for vows, right? For whatever they're perfect. So is actually the same word in another language. Therefore, if you have sort of something that's the equivalent of kolam, that would be relevant because it's the equivalent of something new. But also, and we say that this hero says that kinuye, the equivalent terms of equivalent terms, don't actually affect the vow. So we'll say that Rish Lakish, who says that it was based that these kinuyim are things that the rabbis on their own decided would be equivalent terms, but they aren't actually, konam doesn't actually mean korban in another language, and therefore, if konam itself is something that is sort of decided by the rabbis should have significant, they will then, right, meaning is made up by the rabbis, so then an equivalent term is sort of now two steps removed from the actual term, which is korban, and that's too far away, and it won't actually make a difference. Lo d'chuli alma kinuyin lashon umesein. No, both Beishamai and Basil agree that these kinuyim, that these equivalent terms are actually the way to say the actual term, but in other languages, right? So konam is actually how you say korban in another language. Uveishamai sabre bani nami mishtoi umis, and Beishamai hold that that just like the in other languages you might say konam to reference a korban, you'll also say these kinuyin also as reference to a korban, and therefore they work. Basil sabre bani lo mishtoi umis, whereas Basil says no. These other languages might say konam as a reference to a korban, but they won't mention these other kinuyin, which we'll explain what they are in a minute. Alternatively, Beishamai saver gazirinan kinuyin mishum kinuyin, whereas alternatively Beishamai is concerned that so he says that we make a gezerah by kinuyin, lest you, because if we say that kinuyin is okay, then you might end up saying that kinuyim don't matter either, which is not true. So therefore we say, the kinuyin are also going to affect the nether. Whereas Basil says, look, kinuyin are going to make a difference, are going to be a vow. But kinuyin won't be a vow, and therefore that's that. Whereas Beishamai is concerned, yes, but we have to be concerned that, we have to treat kinuyin like kinuyin to make sure that you don't mess up with kinuyin. Basil is not so concerned. Friends, did you follow that? I don't know, it's basically spaghetti. Okay, Hechi Dami Kinuye Kinuyin. So I'm sure everybody's wondering, Nu, Sruli, tell us, what are Kinuye Kinuyin? I will tell you. The Nedarim, so when it comes, so Hechi Dami Kinuye the Nedarim, so what's Kinuye Kinuyin when it comes to Nedarim? Tanu of Yosef, Mikan Mana, Mikan Chana, Mikan Sana. You happy now? Did I answer your question? Hechi Dami Kinuye Kinuyin the Cherem. Tani Mafsha'a, so Mafsha'a taught, Charakim, Charachim, Charafim. Alright. Kinuye Kinuyin the Nazirus. Tani Rav Yosef, Mechazkana, Minazchana, Mafichna. Ibardu, that's a kasha. Mifchazana, Mai. Oh, what if you say Mifchazana? Mischazana, Mai. What if he says Mischazana? Misazana, Mai. What if he says Misazana? See a Nazir? Omle Ravinu, Rav Ashi, Kinma, Mai. What if a fellow says Kinma? Konam? Kamer? Is he saying konam? Well, duma kinman besim kamer. Maybe he's like referring to a spice in the Ketores. Omarle, Rav Acha, I think that's what that's from. Okay. Omarle Rav Acha, Rav Chiel, Rav Ashi, kina, mai. What if he says kina? Kina shultan golden kamer, is talking about a chicken's nest. Or duma loshon de konam. Or maybe it's a reference to a konam. Okay, tibai, ich weiß nicht. Kinuye Kinuyin de Shvue Hechi Dami. What's Kinuye Kinuyin of Shvue? Shvuel Shvusiel Shkukiel Shkukoil. Shvuel ben Gershom mashma. What do you mean Shvuel is a Shvue? Shvuel means Shvuel ben Gershom. Who's that? Ella Shabuvael. Oh, Shvusiel Shkukiel Mahu. That's what we want to know. Alright. Amar Shmuel. Amar Ashivta Lorma Klum. If you say Ashivta, it's Gunisht. Ashkika lo amar klum, okay? Krinsha lo amar klum. Okay, you want me to tell you? Said the Mishnah, okay, so if you say that you're vowing like Moses did, Tani Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer Omer Bamohi lo amar klum. If you just say like Moses, then that's not enough. B'mumasu da amar Mohi hare elu kinuyin neshvua. But if you say the sacred pledge that Moses made, well, then it's kinui for sure. Friends, that was Daf Yud of Masechta Nedarim. I hope you enjoyed. We talked about different kinuyim, different equivalent terms that you could say. We saw the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish regarding the source for kinuyim. Is kinuyim like Rabbi Yochanan, who says that it's basically alternative ways of saying things? So like konam actually means korban in another language, whereas Rish Lakish says no, it's just the rabbis made these up, that these would be things that would work as equivalent terms for a korban or a cherem, etc. And then we saw the machlokas between Beishami and Beisil regarding kinuye kinuyin. Beishami says that there are surim, Beisil says they're mutarin. Friends, I hope you enjoyed Daf Yud of Masechta Nedarim. Peace out.